feel like the bionic man wearing 400 microphones. But yeah, okay, yeah, you actually are the bionic woman, so I'm glad we could finally come together. It's really a pleasure to be with you guys, an honor, and I'm very excited to be here. Hello. So yeah, I mean, I think what we should do is this. I'm a poet. I would love to engage in conversation with y'all. I also teach quite a bit of writing around the country and around Chicago, multiple levels, getting folks to kind of share their own stories. So also would really like to be able to do that with you guys, which means you will be writing or freestyling a poem at some point. We'll get there. It's going to be easy. You don't have to worry. Does anyone write in here currently? Does anyone write poems or songs or keep a journal or, you know, do any kind of, great. So I am in love with Chicago, even though it is a really great and horrible place. And I think our connection to a home is probably rooted in the good and the bad because that's where we're from. And we probably inevitably always like and appreciate where we're from, but we probably also have a critique, like a love-hate relationship with it. Nelson Algren, who's one of my favorite writers ever, said, loving Chicago is like loving a woman with a broken nose. You may well find lovely or lovelies, but never a lovely so real. And I think that there's a lot of similarities across cities throughout the Midwest. We're all these former industrial towns who've kind of made a way from the farm or from the rural South to cities, and there's the complexity of living in a city. And so one of the things that I've been trying to wrestle with a lot in my new work, and I write a lot about Chicago anyway, but is how we came to this moment of after the industry has left, what do we do to remake the city again in a way where people can live and eat and pay rent and think and be themselves. And so this new collection, I'm going to read some of the poems from. I'm really excited and grateful to be able to read some of them to you because they're new, which means they have not really had much of an audience yet at all. I think one of the poems is brand new, like I don't think anybody has heard it, including probably like my closest readers. So I'm going to start with this poem, which is about the neighborhood that my whole life has revolved around in Chicago, called the Ukrainian Village in Wicker Park. And it's where my grandfather came fleeing the Cossacks in the Ukraine, or Russia at the time. And he moved into this neighborhood in America, in Chicago, in the early, like 1906, I think. And so my whole life, in some ways, has revolved around this neighborhood. It's also been ground zero for gentrification, or what some people would call urban renewal in Chicago. And so that's what a lot of this book is about. This is called A Brief History of Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village, 1906 to 1996. A safe house at 1750 West Haddon, a home made for George Marcus Coval, fleeing Ukrainians trying to kill his family for being something other that Ukrainians didn't recognize as themselves. They came, made a village, an alley to play in, a street to wander about, a growing mass of new corners, comers, who could love just off the boat, or Ave, or train, just out the loop, just off the bus stop, a job to pay for food, a drink in a saloon. The streets Nelson Algren slunk drunk on, the men scattered, scarred, scared, beautiful, broken he thought, women too, golden-armed dropouts, fathers, barmaids, prostitutes, Irish, Russian, then Puerto Rican, black even. In the 80s, no white person with money wanted anything urban. But the outfitters came, raided the block, the mob of city cops, red line ward wand waivers, tiffs, Democratic Party tips, investments, investors bare-bricked a cafe, Hillary's Urban Eatery, outposts, pass lines, coffee shops, galleries, shops, shop at first, a neo-bohemia for the sons and daughters of farm workers, suburbanites with failed American dreams who wanted freedom and heroin, cheap rent and space to think, and not off in some basement, lights on or off in some basement, excitement, make stuff, makeshift galleries, sun ra, space is, the place is a house turned party, electro, turned red dog, turned white noses and white powder, white power, the powers be outside, a whole country waging war on drugs, on thugs, on brown and black boys and bodies, a war outside and in here, a war America was destined to win, a war waged in these division streets, a war in this ward, a war in this village and park, a war in this part of town, a war for the future of Chicago, the country, a war that will determine how to save America, how to destroy America, how to survive in America, how to divide in Chicago, America. All right. So yeah, I'm investigating kind of how we got to this point in Chicago history. And I am writing about some key events in the timeline of Chicago. And I want to share some of those poems with you too. This is, so I think I'm going to do, maybe I'll do all three of these. This is, maybe I'll do them chronologically. The universities in Chicago, the colleges, had a big impact in gentrifying the city and turning neighborhoods that once were working class and diverse into areas where now all you have are, Starbucks and concrete and, white people with little dogs, and so the city has just changed. It's changed in a fairly quick period of time. And so this is, one of the first major institutions to change the city was the institution that I teach for, the University of Illinois Chicago. So this is, which is, painful and ironic. This is University of Illinois Chicago, 1958 to 1965. It starts with two quotes. One from the former Mayor Richard J. Daley on February 22nd, 1965. He said, "Our world is becoming more and more urbanized. Of necessity, a university which truly seeks to meet the needs of society must be a part of urban life. Just as universities made great cities, so too great cities make great universities. And the University of Illinois at Chicago Circle is destined to be one of the great universities of our nation." Hull House activist Florence Scala in Studs Terkel's Division Street said, "What shocked us the most was the amount of land they decided to take. They were out to demolish our entire community." 105 acres in one of the only integrated neighborhoods. The city claimed eminent domain at the entry port to immigrants from everywhere, where King Daley unfurled his new Burnham plan at the foot of the old Maxwell Street near Little Italy, where the wives of city workers organized protests to save their neighborhood and jam their old and round bodies into his city hall office to throw books and jeers and foreign expletives and plead for their homes, and the old mayor sighed and turned a dead ear and a dumb corned beef heart. The Hull House Museum is not a hard-won victory. It's a lonely joke, a reminder of the power wielded, wedded to this land. The whole near west and south sides falling to the same kinds of industriousness, insidiousness. Watch Pilsen Marshmallow. UIC was built in the architectural style of brutalism. What was said to be a bridge to the community became a concrete cast, a cement balloon expanding on inflated budgets in the mayor's hot air, a big bad wolf blowing houses down. 8,000 people displaced, 600 businesses, the campus a typhoon on the side. University Hall, the tallest building in the area, became a stake, a castle in the heavens where the administration looks down as police and prospectors like the peregrine falcons who made refuge there on the 28th floor, birds of a feather, predators of the sky. Cool. So thanks. So this plan comes from a gathering that the mayor and the university heads and administration kind of had in 1973. They called it the Chicago 21 Plan. It starts with this quote. Real estate developer Arthur Rubloff told the Chicago Daily News, "I'll tell you what's wrong with the Loop. It's one word, B-L-A-C-K." The Chicago 21 Plan, 1973. Oak and chandelier, opaque light filtering through the day's death, ashtrays near each fat white hand, the original canopy of cigar smoke, what is meant by backroom dealing, clout on swole, even every conspiracy theory manifest in a wrecking ball and construction contract. Sears and Roebuck, Commonwealth Edison, Skidmore, Owens and Merrill sound like the announcement of an apocalypse. Mayor Daley and $1 billion a year for 15 years, a 125-page document, a plan for the central area communities, a plan to centralize in the Loop, to build a moat, a fortress, a Gold Coast, gold mine, take dead tracks and build condos, Gold Coast, River North, South Loops, to stave off white flight, to usher white folks into condos, into printers' rows, into choke Cabrini of its green, make row homes and housing projects standing tombstones. 21, to usher Chicago into the 21st century, pay to play, pay to stay. Everyone was in on the act. All the universities and big businesses hold the center, transform America, blues to white collar, IKEA, TIFF, daily to daily, black to white, fight, flight from the past, erasure by another name, gentrification's birth certificate. And then finally, out of this little series, Harold Washington, first black mayor in Chicago, died in 1987, and I was 12 at the time. And I remember the day very clearly because Harold was a hope for the whole country. Harold Washington organized and implemented the organizing strategy that Barack Obama used in order to get into the White House, which was based off of a Chicago organizing model by Saul Alinsky, who went to the churches and the synagogues and the mosques because that's where people were. And so he organized the people across city. Harold did the same thing to get elected in the 80s, and Obama used that same strategy really around the country to get elected. So this is a reminiscence about the day Harold died. We went to the Rock and Roll McDonald's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. My mom's took a half a day off from moving lines at the merchandise mart. She was fly and a fashion rep, high on a mound of white. I was 12 and lived with Harold for 4 years. He was somewhere between Malcolm X and Martin King and a black grandfather whose feet I wanted to sit at. He was Barack before Barack, a Chicago hope, a Chicago king who brought Latins and blacks together like Frankie Knuckles did, the first black mayor of DuSable. The Rock and Roll McDonald's was filled with sequins capes, shining 50s bar stools and Elvis Beatles posters, and a hall of fame of whitewashed memorabilia. Not a Buddy Guy pick in sight. Not a Howling Wolf guitar lick on the jukebox. In the city of muddy waters, the golden arches were a white heaven where jump blues turned vanilla shake. I knew I didn't like the music and was beginning to know the extent white people lied on history. And in the parking lot that day, I knew a lunch out with moms and my brother was a luxury. I knew this was how rich people must live, ordering off menus. I knew at any time things could be taken away. Electricity, fathers, mothers in handcuffs. We ate in the car. Mom's juggling a fleeting to-do list in her brain. My brother, a boy monk in the front seat, trying to visualize some future stability. His heart still a soft fruit, sweet. He carried toys in his pocket, wanted a transformer for Hanukkah, hoped what we were was not the limit of what we could become. The car was on because the hawk was swooping between buildings on Ontario and Ohio like a flood, and the radio was audible and murmuring because we were mid-bite and it was tuned to WBBM or WGN or maybe even WGCI if moms let us have a say that day for once in her life. In the damp and growing cold of November, the radio whispered that Harold was gone. It was the afternoon, and I didn't think someone could leave with the sun still out. A giant shining overhead like some Moses, some tubman promising a possible land. The radio said he sipped his coffee, slumped at his table, his heart attacked, and he was gone. I thought we'd have to move next, like when the landlord says go. The mayor was gone, and soon too, the people. Cool. All right. So I'm going to read one more poem that isn't depressing, I hope. It's about a date, because, you know, we take those in Chicago, and in this next section of books, in this next section in the book that I'm writing, there's a big section called "The City Big Enough to Love You In," which is this, like, I love Chicago, and like sometimes I feel like I'm dating Chicago, and Chicago's a very hard person to date because of what I said earlier, because it will, Chicago will break your heart time and again, but you keep coming back. But this is like one of those hopeful, let's be in love poems, I hope. This is called Drive By in Humboldt Park. It is May and crisp, an apple. The 16-inch softball players wear long sleeves beneath their insurance agency-sponsored jerseys. There is a light rain, a gray canopy of sky. You are hungry. Luckily, Humboldt Park has fried food stands with warm meat in the windows. Lucy is the Puerto Rican woman selling empadillas. She says not empanadas. Her smile is a secret she tells to everyone. She puts a shish kebab of chicken and tostones in your hand like a popsicle. A little bit of hot sauce and a little bit of salt. We walk near the pond and nobody knows us here. And here all the ducks are booed up and the birds too chase each other and call each other with song. And even the snail shells abandoned on a rock at the edge of the water are left in a pair. This is a drive-by date, something quick to see each other, to make out standing near the field house before you have to leave, before you throw away the tough bits of kebab. The park is so big in the center, for a moment you can trick yourself. You are not where you are. You are not in the city. This same park where bodies were dumped and pulled from this same pond in the 80s, where Puerto Ricans still fight to hold their homes and culture. My hands are birds at your hip. A flurry, a hot sauce. Humboldt Park is beautiful and changing like all the neighborhoods. For how long will we live here, and how long will we call this home? Okay, very good, thank you. Cool, excellent. So I want to do a few things. I would love to get y'all writing, maybe 1-2 different pieces. And so in order to do that, you guys are going to need something to write with and on. And luckily, the library has provided those things on that cart. So I guess you could either get your own, or maybe folks we could all hand out pens and some paper. That's going to be great. Thank you. And I'm going to try. A lot of times when I am beginning the writing process, I will try to make a list of stuff for myself in order to give myself a sense of a starting place, a springboard. Sometimes it's very intimidating to just look at a blank page and have to create. And so before we do that, I'm going to help us maybe generate a word list that we might use in order to create this piece. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and what I would love for you to do is just answer those questions however you see fit on the page for you. And keep in mind these things, right? You cannot get this wrong as long as you write, right? If you write, you'll get it right. If you don't write, then you do get it wrong because you're not writing. You see what I did there? But it's easy, right? All the information you need to write a poem is within inside of you. Every now and again, a thesaurus will help, but for the most part, you got this. So what I would like us to do is this. I want you to think about what you do better than anyone in the world, and write down those things, right? Now, it could be, maybe you are a neuroscientist and your brain surgery game is crazy, or maybe your, peanut butter and jelly sandwich is not to be messed with. It could be, really important big things or it could be mundane things. But in your estimation, right, and you can have a bit of hubris, a little braggadocio with this, what do you think you do better than anybody in the world? Write down at least 3 things that you think you do unparalleled. Or maybe there's a few people seeing you, but what do you do very well? I am the greatest Arkanoid player in the world. That is a video game, for those of you who don't know what an arcade is, and there seems to be several. There used to be this institution we used to go to and put quarters in these stand-up video games and sit for hours, and our parents would think that we were either at school or lost forever. And I used to spend a lot of time at the arcade mastering Arkanoid. All right, next list. I want you to write down some things you've been taught by people you love. What are some things you've been taught by people you love? Now, they could be abstract, like, humility from my grandfather. That's a big one. I don't know how you're going to get to that story necessarily, but you could. It could also be like, my grandma taught me how to make her pancakes, or, my best friend, Idris taught me about how to be a better man or a better partner or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Who has taught you some things? Maybe what they taught you and who they are, and maybe your relationship with them. Kind of answer the inverse of that same question. What are some things you've taught to people close to you? Could be younger siblings, could be your parents, friends, maybe you are a teacher, it could be colleagues, but what are some things that you've taught to other people? Could be recently, historically, whatever it is. And again, these do not have to be the heaviest of things. These could be, I taught my, I was with my niece and my nephew yesterday. They're 4 and 6, and I taught, I'm pretty sure I taught my nephew how to swear. So I don't think that that's good. I'm not saying I'm a great teacher, but we were playing miniature golf. I'm not very good at miniature golf, and I said shit several times, and he then began to repeat it. That's my bad. Two more lists. One, the second to last one is, what do you do throughout the course of your day that you feel like is not very common in the lives of other people? What do you do in your day where you feel maybe not a ton of people do, right? Like, I get up and write poems. Not a ton of people get the opportunity or the chance or do that. But what are some things that you do in your day that isn't that common, right? Write down some of what those things might be. It could be now you're taking, like my mom is taking some sort of like mosaic class, My dad drives a taxi, And then finally, and in some ways, you could maybe repeat some of what you just wrote, but I'd push you and encourage you to think a little more critically, but I haven't phrased it in this way. What do you consider yourself to be an expert at? What are you, in your life, what are you, and we're an expert at a lot of things, right? My shoe tying ability is very high. You know what I mean? Maybe people are better at tying their shoes than I am, but I also tie my shoes very well. Not today. I'm not tying my shoes today. So I'm saying I tied them in this particular way today. But see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I expertly tied these shoes. You feel me? So what are you in your life, like what do you consider yourself to be an expert at? Could be a lot of things, right? Just write down some of them. And I think one of the traits maybe of being an expert is like thinking about things that you love to do. So hopefully you have a few different things written down on your list. I'm going to read a poem that is in this book that just came out called The Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop. It is an anthology of 78 poets from around the country, all whom are born between 1961 to 1999. So there's about 4 generations of hip hop practitioners in here who are all wrestling with the spirit of the culture and trying to translate what for them, what hip hop is, but in terms of a poem on the page. I'm one of the editors of the book. It took us a long time to get all these poems and poets together. It's kind of 5 years in the making. It just came out in April. And so I'm going to share with you one of my poems in there that's about basically like learning to rap by myself and eventually meeting other people. And before this current generation of Chicago hip hop artists, my generation was really raised on this primarily Latino group of producers in Chicago called the Mo Men. And the Mo Men used to put out these beat cassette tapes. For those who have never lived without an iPhone, cassette tapes are dinosaurs, and they used to fly through the sky and eat little furry things on the ground. And cassette tapes were awesome, and I used to covet these cassette tapes. And so this is about that era and that time and me trying to go get these tapes so I could rhyme. Mo Men beat tapes. Mo Men beat tapes were copped from gramophone. Cassettes jammed into a factory-issued stereo deck of the hoopty I rolled around in. A bucket, bass and drum looped with some string sample fixed. A sliver of perfect adjusted. The scraps of something reconstituted. There was so much space to fill. Iqra, Allah said to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A to B side and around again. A circle, a cipher. I'd drive down and back in my mom's Dodge for these latest volumes of sound. I'd stutter and stop and begin again lonesome and on fire. None. No one I knew rapped. I'd recite alone on Clark Street freestyling, shaping my voice, a sapling, hatchling, rapping, my life emerging in the dark of an empty car. There was a time when hip-hop felt like a secret society of wizards and wordsmiths, magicians meant to find you that you were meant to find, like rappers I listened to and memorized in history class talk specifically to me, for me. And sometimes you'd see a kid whisper to himself in the corner of a bus seat, and you asked if he rhymed and traded a verse like a fur pelt, trapping, some gold or food, this sustenance. You didn't have to ride solo anymore. Jonathan was the first kid I met who rapped. He was black, from a prep school, wore ski goggles on top his head, and always listened to the Wu-Tang Clan, which meant he was only rhyming about science and chess. His pops made him read Sun Tzu. His man's Omega was a fat Puerto Rican kid who wrote graffiti and smoked beaties, and they'd have friends, and the backseat would swell, and the word got passed, scooped like a ball on the playground. You juggle however long your mind could double dutch, and sometimes you take what you were given, lift off like a trampoline, rocket launch, and sometimes you'd scrape your knees, tongue-tied, not quick, words stuck on loop like words stuck like that, but breakthrough, mind knife sharp, mind darts polished and gleaming. We'd ride for the sake of rhyming, take the long way home or wherever we were going, cruise down Lakeshore, back again, blasting, polishing, blazing, polishing these gems, trying to get our mind right. That's that piece. All right, thank you. So, what's up, y'all? So, what we want to do is this. I'm going to encourage you to look back at your list and choose one thing that you know something about, that you know a lot about, and basically talk about your relationship to that thing. Why are you an expert in this particular activity? Maybe it's a how-to piece where you're teaching somebody who doesn't know how to do it, or you're just showing them your experience with it. This this poem about, me going to get these tapes and finding basically an artistic community because of them is seminal to my development and how I became a poet, how I became an artist. For you, just look back and circle the one thing on your list that you feel most drawn to in this moment, right? They are all future sites of future poems, but for now, just choose one thing and write about why you're an expert in that thing. What is your relationship to this thing? How might you share the experience of why this thing is important to you with somebody else? How might you teach this thing to somebody else or to maybe a crew of people who might not know what it is? But I just want to take 7 minutes and see what happens. And the important thing to note is that it's only 7 minutes. I'm going to encourage you to not worry too much about spelling or grammar or if it makes sense. Just write. Just allow yourself to be free in these 7 minutes, and I guarantee something will come. If you're having a hard time getting started, just raise your hand. I'll come around, but should be good to go at this point. 7 minutes. How you're an expert in this thing. Let's go. Excellent. I would like you to write. If you were, let's say, going to give someone not from here a tour of Kalamazoo, but not like the city-sponsored official tour, but like your life tour of the city, like what you think people should for real see if they come here. What are 5 places you would bring them? And they could be places that anybody could go to, like obviously the library, right? That's one on the list, clearly. Best library in the world, 2012, am I right? Right? Yeah, okay. So that's one. Huh?
2002.
Hey, look, yeah, it stays, I updated it, and 2015 too, to the future, 2020 as well, you're going to get that award again. So obviously library is first on your list, but it could also be like, just only a place where you could go. It could be like, if you're in Kalamazoo, you got to go to my grandma's table in her kitchen because she will make you the illest, whatever, you know what I mean? So what is essential on your list? Write down some of those things. Places to bring people not from here. Try to get at least 5 in each category. We're going to go fairly quick just to, get through to build a list. What do people do for work in Kalamazoo? Might be your parents, might be yourself. Think about part-time jobs, full-time gigs. What do people do in this town for work? People people in your neighborhood. Also, what do people do for fun? People work, but then they get off work. What do they do? What happened? And of course, if you are a student, that's your job, right? So you go to school. What do you do after school? Like, what are some things that people do for fun, or where do they go to have fun? Is it a park? Is it a place? Is there there's probably no more arcades, but that's where I would have gone. What do you, or where do you go for fun, or people go for fun? What do folks do here for fun, in your estimation? All right, it's the second day of summer, right? It's June 22nd. Was it 22nd today or 23rd? 22nd, right? Second day of summer. Happy summer. Doesn't feel like that outside yet. Hopefully, we'll get there one day. Between now and next, June 22nd, what are some things in those 365 days over the course of the calendar and cultural life of your life in this city, but also in the cultural life of the city? What are some things that you look forward to that occur every year? What are some annual events that you can bet on? They'll be sure to be on your calendar. You're so excited that, it could be personal things or it could be, civic things, right? You're very excited each summer. You guys have a family reunion. You're very excited for the last day of school. Every, Friday, you go over to your uncle's house and play chess. Every, Halloween, there's a big dance and pumpkin patch party. I don't know what goes on. So I'm saying, what do you look forward to over the course of the year? Put some of those things down. What are some things that are said in your community, in your town, in your group of friends that are only said there? Like, what are some words or some phrases that pretty much only get said? Like, I'll give you an example. Kalamazoo, my whole life, I'm like, oh, Kalamazoo, Michigan. We're on our way to Kalamazoo. But y'all don't call it Kalamazoo. You call it like the zoo or K-Zoo or, because I don't know what you call it. You know what I mean? There's like all these variants. And every place is like that. Every place has their own common particular vernacular and slang. So I guess what are some things that you utilize here in terms of language that really only gets said here? In Chicago, we call everybody Joe. Like, everybody's Joe. What up, Joe? How you feel, Joe? Everyone good, Joe? You good, Joe? You good, Joe? I don't know why we do that. I have some theories, but that's it, for instance. So what do you all say or do? What are some things that are said here that really maybe might not be said anywhere else? And it could only be like you and your friends, or you and your family, right? Or it could be like as a city or as a neighborhood, as a community. Write down some of those things. Do the same thing with food. Like, what is eaten here? That kind of is only eaten here. Now, you might have to be specific with dishes at certain restaurants, like where, or certain, like maybe it's just like delicious homemade meals or something like that. But what are some things, dishes specifically perhaps, that are eaten here that might not be very common elsewhere? Kalamazoo's cuisine is known for its, I just know the breweries, but I mean, and that might be one thing. Yeah, eating or drinking, drunk. I don't know how you say that, but I mean, yeah. Two more. What do you or people that you care about, people around you, or maybe just people in the city itself, what do people hope for here? What do they dream about? What are things here that people you think aspire towards or to? And again, it could be you, could be your family, your father, your mother, it could be community of people around you, people you know or don't know, but in your estimation, what are some things people aspire towards? Okay, and finally, this is kind of broad, but what happens here, what do people do here that might not happen other places? Another way to ask that is also kind of what is if you consider Kalamazoo or wherever you're from, what is your town, your city, your area known for, would you say? What are some things that you guys do unlike anyone else, or maybe better than anyone else? Or what are some things that really begin to define what it means to be from here, in your estimation? And we're going to use this list momentarily. I'm going to read to you an ode, because I love odes. And odes are ways to celebrate some things that typically don't get the kind of shine or respect or, like announcement that they deserve. Odes were, used to only be written about the wealthy in some ways, and in the last century, some of the great poets from Latin America, Federico Garcia Lorca and Pablo Neruda, rescued the ode. There are great contemporary poets like Samantha Thornhill and Aracelis Girmay that continue this tradition of writing about the mundane and elevating it to the status of religious in some ways. And so I'm going to read to you this ode about a style of dance in Chicago that is indigenous to Chicago, but of course has roots in many other dance forms around the world and around the country. Chicago is the home of house music, and what happened the last 10 to 15 years is that young people innovated even that tradition of music and song and made juke music, which is just sped up house music. If house was existing at 110 to 120 beats per minute, young people turned up the beat per minute ratio and made like music at 160 beats per minute, which is very fast. And so there was an accompanying dance that went with it, that goes with it, one of which is called footwork. This is Ode to Footwork. This is tap, gone, gangster. In Wolof, the Senegalese say Zugu, to live wickedly. Juke is wicked music, unsanctioned house, 160 beats per minute. In Chicago, folk dance. Turn the foot, Roadrunner and Michael Jackson. Up rock on amphetamine. Dance in the war zone, in the war on drugs. Jack your body became run for your life. In place, on house arrest. Take this space, small, and make the most of it. Glide, then magic, majestic. Jack life the leg, polyrhythm, pirouette stomp, marionette legs on hot coals, hot blocks, running man, in circle or line, stomp here, up opposite, up rock, out of prison, a battle no one gets hurt in. Most of the time, tiptoe, kung fu, then drag the foot in molasses, kick, it's all that. All those hidden black diasporic movements that might kill white folk eventually, the jig and cakewalk, pigeon wing and ring dance, and capoeira in praise of Shango or DJ Rashad or some other deity that don't look like a private dick or Dick Daley. The foot is furious, the foot is working, the foot is kicking that ass, black on black time in space travel and sound barrier broke, not confined to the speed of the body, impossible. Over, lo-fi, low-budget bass, K-Town, favela funk, frenzy, fake out, ghetto house, James Brown jumping bullets, a ballet of the hustle. No money, no problem. In the South, they spoke Gula, a Creole, called it juke, something disorderly, not normal. The foot, body, not supposed to move like that, not that rubber band, not that unshackled to gravity, elastic, not that free. All right, cool. So, thanks. So, thank you. So, all right, so that is my ode to footwork. I love footwork, right? I cannot do it, right? I'm mesmerized by it. I think it's, incredible, but it's something that also begins to define Chicago a little bit. What I want you to do is write an ode to one of those things on your list. Just go back real quick, look at your list. The thing that jumps out at you the most, that you're most excited about writing about for the next 7 minutes, write about that thing. And all you have to do is really circle that thing if you want, or flip to a clean side of the page and write ode to Kalamazoo Public Library, right? Number one on everyone's list. Maybe there'll be diversity, but maybe not. Ode to, my grandma's banana pudding. Ode to whatever it is. Ode to the park at such and such. Be specific. The ode is a tribute. It's a love song. It's a praise poem. Whatever you want, write about that thing. Ode to, 7 minutes. Let's go. Good luck. Great. Yeah. So leave with the book if you can, and owe the book bug, and thanks to them, and thanks, of course, to the library for bringing me back out. The book will be a nice introduction to contemporary poetry. Folks who are very much alive and doing the work now. Some of them are. Most of the poets in the book are, around your age in one way or another, because it was folks born from 61 to 99, and there's 78 poets, all of whom have 1 to 4 poems in the book. It'll definitely introduce you to some of your new favorite writers, I guarantee that. So, get a book, take a book if you can. And again, thanks for being here today. Appreciate y'all. Thank you.